Just answer that second question first. No, sadly and shockingly, the Attorney General has not yet gotten around to answering Congressman Grayson's letter.
Do you want to say a word, Glenn, about that letter and what it asked?
Sure. Congressman Grayson and several other members of Congress had formed a committee to investigate the NSA stories and invited me to testify back in early August, and I said I would appear only the way that I'm appearing now, which is by video, and said the same thing when they tried to reconvene it in September because of concerns that numerous people in the public discourse have expressed or advocated that myself, Laura Poitras, other journalists who have worked directly on the story closely with Edward Snowden should be viewed as criminals, be arrested and prosecuted. And so there are lots of people now trying to get clarity from the Justice Department as to whether or not we would be guaranteed safe return to the United States. And the Justice Department has refused in every venue, private and public, to give any indication at all one way or the other. Just to address the question of abuse, I think it's important to realize that we're not in the dark about the question of whether or not this kind of surveillance is likely to be abused. We have a very long history in the United States, and as Ariel pointed out, in Chile and lots of other countries, most other countries, where we know that when surveillance powers are permitted to be exercised in the dark, they are not sometimes abused or usually abused, that just human nature renders the abuse inevitable. It will always be abused. And when you combine that with this mentality that says the US government has the right to assess people's guilt in secret, without any trials, without due process, meaning to put them in prisons in Guantanamo or even kill its own citizens by drones based on secret assessments of guilt, what you're doing is creating a system that is not just doesn't have the potential for abuse, but is inherently abusive. And you're absolutely right. Those kinds of assessments will be made all the time by national security state officials based on who you're talking to, how often you're talking to them, where you are when you talk to them. Those are the assessments made when we decide whose lives we're going to end with no trial by drones. And it's the assessment made all the time in secret about which Americans are sufficiently suspicious to warrant greater levels of surveillance, and how anybody could be comfortable with that level of secret surveillance, given our own history and the history of other countries, is, I think, quite mystifying.